Billionaire arrived home unannounced and saw the old maid with his triplets. What he saw shocked him. The heavy iron gates of the Blackwood estate groaned slowly open, piercing the stillness of the rainy Tuesday afternoon. A sleek black limousine glided up the winding driveway, its tires crunching softly against the wet gravel. Inside, Ethan Blackwood sat in the back, his eyes closed, massaging the bridge of his nose. At 35, Ethan had the world at his feet, a billion-dollar empire, magazine covers, and the admiration of the business world. But inside this car, inside his own skin, he felt like a ghost haunting his own life. He checked his watch. It was 2 p.m. He wasn't supposed to be home until Friday. The deal in Tokyo had closed early, a record-breaking merger that would make headlines by morning. He should have been celebrating with champagne and partners. Instead, he had boarded the first flight back to New York, driven by an inexplicable need to be home. Not that home offered much comfort. Since his wife Eleanor had passed away in that tragic car accident 2 years ago, the sprawling mansion had transformed from a place of light and music into a mausoleum of silence. Ethan sighed, adjusting his vibrant blue suit. He dreaded walking through the front door. He dreaded the silence that always greeted him. His daughters, Lily, Maya, and Rose, the triplets who used to run screaming down the hall to tackle him with hugs, hadn't spoken a word since the day their mother died. Not a whisper, not a cry, just silence. They existed in the house like little shadows, cared for by a rotation of nannies who quit within weeks, claiming the house was too sad or the girls were too difficult. He stepped out of the car, waving off the driver who tried to take his leather briefcase. "I've got it, Arthur. Go home to your family." "Thank you, sir. Welcome home." Arthur nodded, though his eyes held that familiar look of pity Ethan despised. Ethan walked up the marble steps to the massive oak double doors. He didn't ring the bell. He didn't want the staff fawning over him. He unlocked the door quietly and stepped into the grand foyer. He expected the usual, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the smell of lemon polish, and the oppressive, heavy quiet. Instead, he heard something impossible. Music. It was a soft, rhythmic humming, accompanied by a sound he hadn't heard in 730 days. Laughter. Ethan froze. His hand gripped the handle of his briefcase so tight his knuckles turned white. Was he hallucinating? Jet lag? Grief finally cracking his mind? He took a tentative step forward. The sound was coming from the formal living room, a room that was strictly off-limits, filled with expensive antiques and white furniture that no child was allowed to touch. He crept across the hallway, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The laughter grew louder. It wasn't the polite, restrained chuckle of an adult. It was the unbridled, bell-like giggling of children. Ethan reached the archway of the living room and stopped dead. His mouth fell open. His briefcase slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud, but no one heard it over the music. The room, usually a sterile display of wealth, had been transformed. The expensive velvet curtains were thrown wide open, letting the grey afternoon light flood in, but the room felt bright, vibrant. In the center of the room, amidst the priceless vases and sculptures, a party was in full swing. His daughters, Lily, Maya, and Rose, were dressed in matching fuchsia pink dresses with large satin bows, outfits he hadn't seen them wear in months. They looked like little princesses, but more importantly, they looked alive. Lily and Maya were sitting on the plush white rug, clapping their hands and laughing so hard their faces were flushed pink. And there, in the middle of it all, was the new maid. Mrs. Higgins, the housekeeper, had mentioned hiring someone new last week. "A young thing," she had said dismissively, "but she needs the work." Ethan stared. She was breathtaking. She looked about 25, with messy golden-brown hair pulled back into a loose bun that was currently falling apart. She wore the standard black and white uniform, but on her it didn't look severe. It looked playful. She was currently spinning in circles, and perched high on her shoulders was Rose, the quietest, most withdrawn of the triplets. Rose was holding onto the maid's head, her head thrown back, a silent scream of joy on her face that suddenly broke into a squeal, a real, audible squeal. "Higher, Sarah, higher!" Rose shouted. Ethan's breath hitched. She spoke. His daughter just spoke. The maid, Sarah, laughed, a warm, throaty sound that seemed to chase the shadows out of the corners of the room. "Hold on tight, little monkey. We're going to fly to the moon." Sarah spun faster, her skirt flaring out. She wasn't treating them like fragile glass dolls or tragic orphans. She was treating them like children. She stopped spinning and gently lowered Rose to the couch, tackling her with tickles. The other two girls jumped on her back, a pile of pink dresses and black uniform rolling around on the white carpet that cost more than most cars. Okay, the monster surrenders," Sarah gasped, lying on her back as the three girls pinned her down. "You are too strong for me. What have you been eating? Spinach?" "Pancakes," Maya yelled. "We ate pancakes." "Chocolate pancakes," Lily added, her voice raspy from disuse but loud and clear. Ethan felt tears pricking his eyes. He stood there, paralyzed, watching a miracle unfold on his living room floor. He should have been angry. The rules were strict. No playing in the formal living room, no noise, strict schedules. But how could he be angry when his house, for the first time in 2 years, felt like a home? Then the mood shifted. Sarah sat up, brushing hair out of her face. As she moved, the top button of her uniform shifted, and a silver necklace swung out from beneath the fabric. It caught the light, glinting sharply. Ethan's gaze locked onto it. The air left his lungs. The warmth he had felt seconds ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp shock. He knew that necklace. It was a unique piece, a custom-made silver pendant shaped like a teardrop, with a small sapphire embedded in the center. He had designed it himself. He had given it to Elena on their 5th anniversary, just months before she died. Elena was wearing it the day of the accident. The police had returned her personal effects, but the necklace had been missing. They assumed it was lost in the wreckage. Ethan's shock turned into a storm of confusion and sudden dark suspicion. Why was this Maid, this stranger, wearing his dead wife's missing jewelry? He stepped fully into the room, his shadow falling over the group on the floor. "What is going on here?" His voice was deeper and louder than he intended. The laughter cut off instantly. The triplets froze. They looked up, saw their father, and the light in their eyes dimmed. They scrambled off Sarah and huddled together, retreating into their shell of silence. Sarah turned her head, her eyes widening as she saw the tall, imposing figure in the blue suit looming over them. She didn't look terrified, though. She looked surprised, yes, but there was a fierce protectiveness in the way she immediately shifted her body, placing herself between him and the girls. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, scrambling to her feet and smoothing down her apron. She didn't lower her eyes. She met his gaze directly. "We weren't expecting you." "Obviously," Ethan said, his voice cold. He walked closer, ignoring the girls for a moment, his eyes fixed on Sarah's neck. She had tucked the necklace back inside her uniform as she stood up, but he knew it was there. "I arrive home to find my children treating the formal living room like a playground." Sarah lifted her chin. "They were happy, sir. It's the first time they've laughed all week." "And you," Ethan stepped into her personal space. She smelled like vanilla and rain. It was intoxicating, which only made him angrier. "Who gave you permission to be in here? And more importantly—" He reached out, his hand hovering near her collarbone, causing her to flinch back slightly. "Where did you get that necklace?" Sarah's hand flew to her chest, clutching the fabric over the hidden pendant. Her face went pale. I can explain, sir. It's not what you think." "It better be exactly what I think," Ethan growled, the pain of his wife's memory mixing with the shock of the moment. "Because right now, I think you're a thief who is taking advantage of my grieving daughters." "Daddy, no!" The voice was small, trembling but fierce. Ethan turned. It was Lily. She had stepped forward, her small hands clenched into fists. "Don't hurt Sarah," Maya added, stepping up beside her sister. She's ours," Rose whispered, completing the wall of defense. Ethan stared at his daughters. They were speaking to him, defending her, standing against him. He looked back at Sarah. She wasn't just a maid. She was a mystery. A beautiful, dangerous mystery who had done the impossible with his children, but was wearing a piece of his dead wife's soul around her neck. "Into my study," Ethan commanded, his voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "Now, we are going to have a long talk, Ms. Miller," she said softly. "Sarah Miller." "Ms. Miller," Ethan finished, "and you better pray your explanation is good." The study was the darkest room in the house. Heavy mahogany bookshelves lined every wall, filled with leather-bound volumes that Ethan rarely read. The heavy velvet drapes were drawn tight, blocking out the afternoon light. It was Ethan's fortress of solitude, a place where he drank scotch and stared at photos of a life that no longer existed. He walked behind his massive desk and didn't sit down. He turned to face Sarah, who had followed him in, and closed the heavy door quietly behind her. She stood in the center of the Persian rug, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked small in the imposing room, but she didn't slouch. There was a quiet dignity about her that unnerved him. "Explain," Ethan said, cutting straight to the point. "And start with the necklace." Sarah took a deep breath. She reached up and unclasped the silver chain, pulling the pendant free. She held it out to him. Her hand was trembling slightly. "I didn't steal it, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "The girls gave it to me." Ethan snatched the necklace from her palm. The metal was warm from her skin. He ran his thumb over the sapphire. It was undoubtedly Elena's. "My daughters gave this to you? They don't even have access to the safe where Elena's things are kept." "It wasn't in a safe," Sarah said. "It was in the old dollhouse in the nursery, hidden under a miniature bed. Lily showed me. She said her mommy hid it there for them, a secret treasure." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. Elena used to play hide-and-seek with the girls using her jewelry. It was a game he had forgotten. "Why give it to you?" Ethan asked, his eyes narrowing. "It's worth thousands of dollars. Did you ask them for it?" "No." Sarah's eyes flashed with indignation. "I tried to give it back. I told them it was too precious. But Rose had a panic attack 3 days ago. There was a thunderstorm. She was screaming, terrified. I held her, sang to her. When she calmed down, she went to the dollhouse, got this, and put it around my neck. She said—" Sarah paused, her eyes softening. "She said I smell like safety. She said her mommy would want me to have it because I make the monsters go away." Ethan stared at her. He wanted to call her a liar. He wanted to fire her on the spot, but he remembered the scene in the living room, the laughter, the speaking, Rose defending her. "They haven't spoken in 2 years, Ethan murmured, almost to himself. "Therapists, specialists, doctors. No one could get a word out of them. How did you do it?" Sarah hesitated, then shrugged slightly. "I didn't try to fix them, sir. I just joined them. I didn't ask them to talk. I just talked to them. I told them stories. I made a fool of myself dancing. I showed them that it's okay to make noise in a quiet house." She took a step closer. "Mr. Blackwood, those little girls are starving, not for food. The chef feeds them well. They are starving for affection, for touch, for someone to look at them and smile, instead of looking at them and crying." Ethan felt the words like a physical blow. He turned away, pouring himself a drink with shaking hands. She was right. He couldn't look at them without seeing Elena, without feeling the crushing weight of his loss. So he had pulled away, burying himself in work, leaving them in a cold, luxurious prison. "I'm not a thief," Sarah said softly to his back. "I'm just a maid who loves your daughters. If you want me to leave, I will, but please, don't take the music away from them again." Ethan turned back, glass in hand. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Beneath the uniform, she was stunning, not in the polished, artificial way of the women in his social circle, but in a raw, natural way. Her eyes were a deep, compassionate hazel. Her lips were full and currently pressed into a worried line. And she was young, 25, 10 years his junior, yet she seemed to possess a wisdom he had lost. "Keep it," Ethan said gruffly, shoving the necklace back toward her. Sarah blinked. "Sir!" "For now," he corrected, unable to fully let go of his suspicion. "If the girls gave it to you, taking it away would only cause more trauma. But you are on probation, Miss Miller. One slip-up, one lie, and you're out." "I understand," she whispered. "And another thing," Ethan said, walking around the desk until he was inches from her. The air between them crackled with a sudden, unexpected tension. "No more parties in the formal living room. But the nursery is fair game." A small, genuine smile broke across Sarah's face, transforming her. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." Just then, the heavy oak doors of the study burst open. "Ethan, darling!" The sharp, high-pitched voice shattered the moment. Sarah stepped back quickly, putting distance between herself and Ethan. Vanessa swept into the room like a hurricane of designer perfume and red silk. She was Ethan's fiancée, a relationship that made sense on paper but felt empty in reality. Vanessa was the daughter of a steel magnate, beautiful, ambitious, and utterly cold. She stopped in the center of the room, her eyes darting from Ethan to Sarah. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened into shards of ice. "I heard you were back early." Vanessa purred, walking over to Ethan and planting a possessive kiss on his cheek, all while staring at Sarah. "And I see you're already busy. With the staff." "Vanessa," Ethan said, wiping lipstick off his cheek. "This is Sarah, the new nanny and maid." "Maid!" Vanessa corrected sharply. She looked Sarah up and down, her lip curling in distaste. "A bit young, isn't she? And that uniform, it's terribly disheveled. Have you been wrestling pigs, dear?" "I was playing with the children, Mum," Sarah said politely, though her posture stiffened. "Playing?" Vanessa laughed, a harsh, tinkling sound. "We pay you to clean and discipline, not to play. The girls are wild enough as it is." Vanessa turned to Ethan, linking her arm through his. "Ethan, darling, you really must be stricter with the hiring process. She looks like she just rolled out of bed." Ethan felt a surge of irritation. "She got the girls to speak, Vanessa." Vanessa froze. "What?" "They spoke. To her. They were laughing." Vanessa's face twitched. For a second, a flash of pure panic crossed her features before she masked it with a look of skeptical delight. "Really? How wonderful. Although one wonders what kind of tricks she used to bribe them." Vanessa stepped away from Ethan and circled Sarah like a shark. "Well, Sarah, since you are so good with the children, you can make yourself useful tonight. Ethan and I are hosting a dinner party, a celebration for his merger. I want the girls brought down to say hello to the guests, dressed perfectly, silent, well-behaved. Can you manage that? Or is your talent only for roughhousing?" "I can manage," Sarah said quietly. "Good," Vanessa snapped. "Now go! You smell like sweat and cheap soap." Sarah nodded once to Ethan, her eyes lingering on his for a split second, a silent plea or perhaps a reassurance, before she turned and left the room. As the door closed, Vanessa turned on Ethan, her mask dropping. "She has to go, Ethan." "What? Why?" Ethan asked, baffled. "She's disrespectful. Did you see how she looked at me? And she's too young. It's inappropriate to have a girl like that around the triplets. She'll teach them bad manners." Vanessa walked over to the desk, trailing her hand along the edge. "Besides, I don't trust her. There's something about her eyes. She's hiding something." "You're being paranoid," Ethan sighed, sitting down and rubbing his temples. "She's the first person in 2 years who has connected with them." "Exactly," Vanessa hissed, "which means she's manipulating them. and I won't have a servant manipulating my future stepdaughters." She leaned over the desk, her voice dropping to a seductive yet threatening whisper. "Watch her, Ethan, or I will." Ethan watched Vanessa, feeling a cold pit in his stomach. He looked at the closed door where Sarah had exited. He had a feeling that the peace of his house was about to be shattered, and for the first time he wasn't sure whose side he was on. Upstairs in the nursery, Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She pulled the necklace out from her uniform and clutched it tight. She had survived the interrogation, but she had seen the look in Vanessa's eyes. It was the look of a predator who had just spotted competition. Sarah looked at the triplets, who were waiting for her on the rug with hopeful eyes. "Is Daddy mad?" Rose asked. "No, sweetie," Sarah lied, forcing a bright smile. "Daddy is just adjusting. Now who wants to help me pick out dresses for the party?" But as she played with the girls, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of dread. She knew women like Vanessa. She knew that tonight's dinner party wasn't just a celebration, it was going to be a test. And Sarah had a terrible feeling that Vanessa was already planning how to make her fail. The crystal chandeliers of the Blackwood mansion cast a prismatic glow over the long mahogany dining table. It was set for 20 guests, adorned with white roses and silver cutlery that gleamed under the lights. The air was thick with the scent of roasted duck, expensive perfume, and the low murmur of polite, meaningless conversation. Ethan sat at the head of the table, nursing a glass of wine he hadn't touched. He felt like an imposter in his own home. Every time the kitchen door swung open, his eyes darted toward it, hoping to catch a glimpse of Sarah. Vanessa sat to his right, radiating a cold, sharp beauty in a crimson evening gown. She held court with the wives of his business partners, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. "Oh, the children are simply delightful," she was saying to Mrs. Vanderbilt. "I've been working so hard to instill some discipline in them. They were practically feral before I stepped in." Ethan gripped his glass. "You haven't done a thing," he thought, but he remained silent. He was tired of fighting. "Speaking of the children," Vanessa announced, tapping her spoon against her glass to silence the room, "I thought it would be lovely for everyone to see our little angels. Sarah, bring them in." The double doors opened, and Sarah entered. A collective hush fell over the room. She had changed into a fresh, crisp uniform, her hair neatly pinned back, but she looked exhausted. However, as she ushered the triplets in, her face softened into a protective smile. Lily, Maya, and Rose walked in holding hands. They looked angelic in matching navy velvet dresses with white collars, but they looked terrified. The sea of staring faces was overwhelming. They immediately pressed back against Sarah's legs, using her as a shield. "Come here, darlings," Vanessa cooed, extending a manicured hand with long red nails. "Come give Mommy Vanessa a kiss." The girls didn't move. Rose buried her face in Sarah's apron. An awkward silence stretched across the table. Vanessa's smile tightened into a grimace. "Well," she laughed nervously, "they are shy. Sarah, bring them here. Don't just stand there like a statue." Sarah gently placed her hands on the girl's shoulders. "It's okay," she whispered, low enough that only Ethan and the girls heard. "Just say hello and we can go back to the story." Encouraged by her touch, the girls took a few tentative steps forward. Lily looked at Ethan. "Hi, Daddy," she squeaked. The guests gasped. "I thought they were mute," a man whispered loudly. Ethan smiled, a genuine, heartbreaking smile. "Hello, Princess." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. The attention was not on her. It was on the miracle Sarah had performed. She stood up abruptly. "Yes, well, they are tired. Sarah, take them to the patio for some fresh air before bed. The dining room is too stuffy." "It's raining, Mom," Sarah said quietly. "The patio stones will be slippery." "It stopped raining an hour ago," Vanessa snapped. Do as you are told, or are you too incompetent to watch 3 children on a balcony? Ethan opened his mouth to intervene, but Sarah nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Come on, girls. She led them toward the French doors that opened onto the expansive stone terrace overlooking the garden. The dinner resumed. Vanessa excused herself moments later. I just need to powder my nose, she said, squeezing Ethan's shoulder. Enjoy the wine, darling. Ethan watched her go, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He tried to focus on the conversation about stock markets and mergers, but his mind was on the patio. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the air. It wasn't a child's scream, it was Vanessa's. Help! Oh my God, help! Ethan bolted from his chair, knocking it over. He sprinted toward the patio doors, the guests following in a chaotic wave. He burst out onto the terrace into the damp, cold night air. The scene before him stopped his heart. Sarah was on her knees near the edge of the stone railing, her arms wrapped tightly around Rose, who was sobbing hysterically. Maya and Lily were crying nearby. Vanessa was standing over them, clutching her chest, pointing an accusing finger at Sarah. She tried to push her, Vanessa shrieked, her voice echoing in the yard. I came out to check on them, and I saw her. She was dangling Rose over the edge. She's insane. No, Sarah yelled, looking up at Ethan, her eyes wild with panic. No, she slipped. The stones are wet, just like I said. I caught her. I saved her. Liar! Vanessa lunged forward, grabbing Rose from Sarah's arms. The little girl reached back for Sarah, screaming, but Vanessa held her tight. You tried to kill her. And look! Vanessa pointed to Sarah's apron pocket. Something was sparkling inside. My bracelet, the diamond cuff. Ethan stepped forward, his mind reeling. Vanessa, calm down. What are you saying? Check her pocket, Ethan, Vanessa demanded. I couldn't find it earlier. She stole it. She's a thief and a psycho. Ethan looked at Sarah. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Blackwood, please, I didn't take anything. I don't know how it got there. Ethan reached down. His hand trembled as he reached into Sarah's apron pocket. His fingers brushed against cold metal. He pulled it out. It was Vanessa's heavy diamond bracelet, worth more than Sarah would make in 10 years. The sight of the diamonds in his hand, combined with the image of his daughter screaming near the edge of a 20-foot drop, snapped something inside him. The logic, the intuition that told him Sarah was good. It all crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Fear for his children blinded him. I trusted you, Ethan whispered, his voice shaking with fury. Sir, please, I swear. Sarah began to stand up. Don't come near them, Ethan roared, stepping between Sarah and the girls. The violence in his voice made the triplets recoil. You stole from this house, and you endangered my child. You are done. Daddy, no! Lily screamed, tugging on his pant leg. Vanessa pushed her. Vanessa pushed Rose. Stop it, Lily, Vanessa hissed, grabbing the girl's arm painfully tight. Stop lying for the maid. She has brainwashed you. She looked at Ethan. See, she's turned them against us. Get her out of here, Ethan, now, before I call the police. Ethan looked at Sarah. She looked small, defeated, and heartbroken. Not because of the accusation, he realized, but because she was looking at the girls, who were being dragged away by Vanessa. Get your things, Ethan said, his voice cold and dead. Arthur will drive you to the station. If I ever see you near my family again, I will destroy you. Mr. Blackwood, listen to your daughters, Sarah pleaded, tears choking her voice. Please, just listen to— Get out! Ethan shouted, pointing to the gate. Sarah flinched. She looked at the triplets one last time. I love you, she mouthed to them. Then, with her head bowed, she turned and ran into the darkness of the garden, away from the mansion, away from the light. Ethan stood in the rain, clutching the diamond bracelet until it cut into his palm, listening to his daughters scream for the only mother they had known in years. 3 days had passed since the dinner party. The Blackwood mansion was no longer just silent. It was a tomb. The brief, beautiful burst of life that Sarah had brought into the house had been extinguished, leaving behind a darkness that felt heavier than before. Outside, a relentless storm battered the windows, mirroring the atmosphere inside. Ethan sat in his study, a tumbler of scotch in his hand. It was 11:02 a.m. on a Friday. He hadn't gone to the office. He hadn't shaved. He wore the same clothes he had worn yesterday. He stared at the wall, but he wasn't seeing the expensive art. He was seeing the look in Sarah's eyes when he expelled her. "I love you." She hadn't begged for her job. She hadn't begged for money. She had told his children she loved them. Ethan. The door opened and Vanessa walked in. She was dressed in a sharp white suit, looking immaculate and annoyed. "Are you still drinking? We have the charity gala tonight." "I'm not going," Ethan grunted, taking a sip. "Don't be ridiculous. You have to go. It's for your public image." Vanessa walked over and pulled the curtains open, letting the grey light flood the room. Ethan winced. "Also, the new nanny is here. Mrs. Grotter. She's German, very strict, excellent references. I want you to meet her." "I don't want to meet her," Ethan said. "Send her away." "We need a nanny, Ethan. The girls are out of control." Vanessa threw her hands up. "They haven't eaten in 2 days. They locked themselves in the nursery and pushed the dresser against the door. They won't let me in. They just scream for her." Ethan slammed his glass down on the desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Maybe because they miss her, Vanessa." "They miss the chaos," Vanessa argued. "They miss being allowed to run wild. We need discipline. Mrs. Grotter will fix them." "Fix them?" Ethan stood up, his eyes bloodshot. "They are children, Vanessa, not broken appliances. They were happy. For 1 week, they were happy." "She was a thief," Vanessa yelled back. "She stole my diamonds. She almost threw Rose off the balcony. Why do you keep defending her? Unless—" She narrowed her eyes, her voice dripping with venom. "Unless you were sleeping with her." "Get out," Ethan said quietly. "Excuse me? Get out of my study. Leave me alone," Vanessa scoffed. "Fine. Sulk all you want. I'll handle the hiring. Someone has to be the adult in this house." She slammed the door as she left. Ethan sank back into his chair. He felt sick, physically and emotionally. The image of the bracelet in Sarah's pocket kept replaying in his mind. It didn't make sense. Sarah had been wearing a necklace worth thousands, Elena's necklace, and she had tried to give it back. Why would she steal a bracelet and then keep it in her pocket during a dinner party? It was too sloppy, too stupid, and Sarah wasn't stupid. And Lily— Vanessa pushed Rose. That's what Lily had screamed. Ethan rubbed his face. He had dismissed it as a child's confusion. But what if? He looked at his laptop. He had installed a state-of-the-art security system years ago, cameras in every room, every hallway, every exterior angle. He had never checked the footage from that night. He had been too angry, too cowardly. He opened the laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. If he looked, he might see Sarah stealing. He might confirm that he was right to fire her, or he might see something else. He logged into the server. He pulled up the timeline for Tuesday night. Camera 04, dining room, 8:15 p.m. He watched Sarah bring the girls in. He zoomed in on her face. She looked terrified, protective. He watched Vanessa's interactions. He saw Vanessa squeeze Sarah's arm hard when she thought no one was looking. He saw the fake smiles. Camera 07, patio, terrace, 8:43 p.m. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He clicked play. The image was crisp, despite the night vision mode. He saw Sarah lead the girls out. She knelt down and zipped up Rose's jacket. She was talking to them, pointing at the moon. Then the patio door opened. Vanessa stepped out. Ethan leaned closer to the screen. On the video, Vanessa said something to Sarah. Sarah nodded and turned to go back inside, presumably to fetch something Vanessa requested. Sarah hesitated, looking at the girls, but Vanessa waved her hand dismissively, indicating she would watch them. Sarah went inside. The moment the door closed behind Sarah, Vanessa's posture changed. She didn't look at the girls. She reached into her own clutch purse. She pulled out the diamond bracelet. Ethan stopped breathing. He watched as Vanessa walked over to where Sarah had left her apron on a patio chair. Sarah had taken it off to adjust Rose's dress. Vanessa looked around quickly, checking if anyone was watching. Then she slipped the bracelet into the apron's pocket. "Oh my God," Ethan whispered, but the video wasn't over. Sarah came back out with a glass of water. She put her apron back on. Vanessa walked over to Rose, who was looking at a flower pot near the railing. The railing was high, safe, but there was a decorative stone bench right next to it. Vanessa said something to Rose. Rose shook her head. Vanessa grabbed Rose's arm and forcefully pulled her toward the bench. She pointed at the top of the railing. Rose looked scared. She tried to pull away. Then Vanessa did the unthinkable. She shoved Rose. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough. Rose stumbled, her foot slipping on the wet stone. She fell backward, her head missing the sharp corner of the bench by inches. She began to slide toward the gap in the railing. Sarah moved like a blur. She didn't hesitate. She threw herself across the wet stones, sliding on her knees, and grabbed Rose's ankle just as the little girl's legs went over the edge. It was a heroic save. And then, on the screen, Vanessa threw her head back and screamed for help, acting out the performance of a lifetime. Ethan paused the video. He was shaking. A cold, murderous rage was spreading through his veins, displacing the alcohol, displacing the grief. He had fired the woman who saved his daughter's life. He had cast out the only person who loved them. And he was living with a monster. He looked at the timestamp. That was 3 days ago. Sarah could be anywhere. She could have left the state. She could be gone forever. He stood up, knocking his heavy leather chair backward. He didn't care. He grabbed his car keys off the desk. He didn't call Arthur. He didn't call security. He stormed out of the study and up the grand staircase. He went straight to the nursery. He could hear the muffled sobbing from inside. "Lily! Maya! Rose!" he shouted through the door. "It's Daddy!" Silence. Then a small voice. "Go away! You sent Sarah away!" "I'm bringing her back," Ethan yelled, his voice cracking. "I'm going to get her right now, but I need you to unlock the door and stay safe until I get back. Can you do that?" There was a scrambling sound, and the heavy dresser was dragged back. The door creaked open. 3 tear-stained, pale faces looked up at him. They looked like ghosts. Ethan dropped to his knees and pulled them all into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so stupid." He kissed their foreheads. "I am going to find her. I promise I won't come back without her." He stood up, turning to leave, and found Vanessa standing at the top of the stairs, looking confused. "Ethan, where are you going?" "The nanny is downstairs." Ethan walked up to her. He stopped inches from her face. The look in his eyes was so terrifying that Vanessa actually took a step back, faltering in her high heels. "Get out of my house," he said. His voice was dangerously quiet. "What? Ethan, don't be dramatic." "I saw the tape, Vanessa." The color drained from her face instantly. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "You have 1 hour," Ethan said. 1 hour to pack your bags and get off my property. If you are here when I get back, I will have you arrested for child endangerment and theft, and I will destroy your father's company just for sport." He didn't wait for her response. He ran down the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. He burst out of the front door, jumped into his sports car, and roared down the driveway, the tires screeching against the asphalt. He had no idea where Sarah lived. He had no address. But he knew he had to find her. He had to, or he would never forgive himself. The engine of the Aston Martin roared like a wounded beast as Ethan weaved through the gridlocked Manhattan traffic. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the city lights into blurred streaks of red and yellow on his windshield. His knuckles were white against the leather steering wheel. He realized with a jolt of panic that he didn't know where he was going. He had fired her, cast her out, and he didn't even know where she slept at night. He fumbled for his phone, swerving slightly into the next lane, earning a blaring honk from a taxi. He dialed Mrs. Higgins, the head housekeeper. Pick up, he muttered, his heart hammering against his ribs. Mr. Blackwood? Mrs. Higgins's voice was startled. Is everything all right? I heard shouting. Where does she live, Mrs. Higgins? Ethan shouted over the hum of the engine. Sarah, where does she live? There was a pause. Sarah? Sir, you fired her. I know what I did, Ethan snapped, immediately regretting his tone. Please, I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I need to find her before she leaves. Do we have an address on file? I have her application form here in the kitchen office, Mrs. Higgins said, sensing the desperation in his voice. Hold on. The seconds ticked by like hours. Ethan tapped his fingers on the dashboard, watching the digital clock. 2:14 p.m. Here it is, Mrs. Higgins came back on the line. She lives in the Bronx, 452 East 189th Street, apartment 4B. But, sir, what? She called me 10 minutes ago to say goodbye. She said she couldn't stay in the city. She said it was too painful. She's taking the 3:00 p.m. bus back to Ohio to stay with her aunt. Ethan's blood ran cold. It was 2:15 p.m. The Port Authority bus terminal was across town, in the middle of Friday afternoon traffic. Thank you, Ethan gasped, and threw the phone onto the passenger seat. He didn't drive like a CEO. He drove like a madman. He cut across 3 lanes of traffic, ignoring the angry gestures of other drivers. He ran 2 red lights, his heart in his throat. He wasn't just chasing a maid. He was chasing the only chance at redemption he had left. He was chasing his daughter's smiles. He arrived at the rundown apartment building in the Bronx 20 minutes later. It was a stark contrast to his world of marble floors and velvet curtains. The brickwork was crumbling, and there was trash piled on the sidewalk. He felt a stab of shame. This was where she came home to every night after caring for his children in a mansion she could never afford. He didn't bother locking the car. He ran inside, taking the stairs 2 at a time because the elevator was out of order. He pounded on the door of 4B. No answer. He pounded again. Sarah, please! The door to 4C opened, and an elderly woman peeked out, looking suspicious. What do you want? Who are you? I'm looking for Sarah Miller, Ethan said, breathless, his suit soaked from the rain. She's gone, the woman said, shaking her head. Saw her leave 10 minutes ago with 2 big suitcases, crying her eyes out, poor thing. Said she was going to the terminal. 10 minutes, Ethan whispered. He checked his watch. 2:40 p.m. He turned and bolted back down the stairs. The Port Authority was a chaotic hive of humanity. The smell of wet wool, exhaust fumes, and fast food filled the air. Ethan sprinted through the main hall, scanning the departure boards. Ohio, Cleveland, Gate 42, departing 3 p.m. It was 2:55 p.m. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the complaints of people he shoved aside. He ran past the ticket counters, down the escalator, sprinting toward the lower gates. His lungs burned. His expensive Italian shoes slipped on the linoleum floor, but he regained his balance and kept running. Gate 42 was at the far end. He saw the line of passengers moving slowly toward the bus. The driver was checking tickets. And there she was. She was near the front of the line. She was wearing a thick grey coat that looked too big for her, and she was struggling with 2 battered suitcases. Her hair was wet, plastered to her cheeks. Even from this distance, he could see the slump in her shoulders, the defeat in her posture. Sarah. Ethan's voice was lost in the noise of the terminal. He ran faster. She handed her ticket to the driver. The driver tore it and gestured for her to board. She stepped onto the metal stairs of the bus. Sarah, wait! Ethan vaulted over a barrier, startling a security guard who shouted, Hey! You can't go back there! Ethan ignored him. He reached the bus just as the pneumatic doors began to hiss shut. He slammed his hand against the glass. The driver jumped, hitting the button to reopen the doors. "Buddy, are you crazy? Step back!" Sarah was standing in the aisle, looking for a seat. She turned at the commotion. When she saw Ethan standing there, drenched, panting, with wild eyes, she dropped her carry-on bag. Her face didn't light up. It closed off. She looked terrified and angry. "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What? Why are you here? Did you come to have me arrested?" Ethan stepped onto the bus. The driver stood up to block him, but Ethan held up a hand. "Just give me 1 minute, please." He looked at Sarah. The passengers were staring, whispering. "Sarah," Ethan said, his voice cracking. He walked down the narrow aisle until he was standing in front of her. "Please, don't go." Sarah took a step back, her back hitting a seat. Tears welled up in her eyes instantly. "Leave me alone. You humiliated me. You called me a thief. You wouldn't even let me say goodbye to them." "I know," Ethan said. He didn't try to defend himself. He dropped to his knees right there on the dirty floor of the bus. The bus went silent. A billionaire on his knees in front of a maid. "I was wrong," Ethan said, looking up at her. "I was blind and I was stupid. I watched the tapes, Sarah. I saw everything." Sarah's breath hitched. You watched them?" "I saw her plant the bracelet. I saw her push Rose, and I saw you save my daughter's life." Ethan reached out but didn't dare touch her. "I saw a hero, and I treated her like a criminal." Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, a sob escaping. "I tried to tell you." "I know. And I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you just, please come home. The girls, they haven't eaten. They won't unlock the door. They just want you." Sarah looked down at him. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the total lack of pride. This wasn't the arrogant billionaire who had looked down his nose at her. This was a desperate father. "And Vanessa?" Sarah asked quietly. "Gone," Ethan said firmly. "I kicked her out. She will never come near us again, I promise you." Sarah looked around the bus. She looked at her suitcases. She looked at the ticket in her hand, her escape route to a quiet, safe life where no one would accuse her of things she didn't do. "I can't just go back to being a maid, Ethan," she said, using his first name for the first time. "Not after that. I can't walk on eggshells waiting to be fired." Ethan stood up slowly. He took her hands in his. "You won't be just a maid. You are the only person who holds this family together. You will have full authority. No one questions you, not even me, especially not me." He paused, his thumb brushing her knuckle. "We need you, Sarah. I need you." Sarah searched his eyes. She saw pain, regret, and something else, hope. She thought of Rose, Lily, and Maya alone in that dark room. She thought of Rose's little arms around her neck. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay." Ethan let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 3 days. He didn't care about the audience. He pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her wet hair. "Thank you. Thank you." The drive back to the mansion was quiet, but it wasn't an awkward silence. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. Ethan drove slower this time. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, watching the city fade away and the familiar gates of the estate appear. When they pulled up to the house, the rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, allowing the late afternoon sun to pierce through in golden shafts. Ethan turned off the car. He looked at Sarah. "Are you ready?" "I think so." She smiled nervously. They walked to the front door together. Ethan didn't use his key. He rang the doorbell. Mrs. Higgins opened it. When she saw Sarah, the older woman let out a cry of joy and pulled her into a crushing embrace. "Oh, thank heavens, you found her." "Where are they?" Sarah asked, pulling back. "Still in the nursery. They haven't made a sound." Sarah didn't wait. She ran up the grand staircase, Ethan following close behind. She reached the nursery door. The heavy dresser was still blocking it from the inside. "Lily! Maya! Rose!" Sarah called out, knocking softly. "It's Sarah! I'm home!" There was a moment of absolute silence, then a scrape of wood against floorboards, a frantic shuffling. The door flew open. For a second the triplets stood there, their eyes wide, red-rimmed and puffy. They looked from Sarah to Ethan, unsure if this was a trick. Then Sarah dropped to her knees and opened her arms. "Come here, my loves." The dam broke. The three girls launched themselves at her with a collective wail of relief. They collided with her, knocking her backward onto the rug, burying their faces in her neck, her hair, her coat. "You came back! You came back!" Maya sobbed. "We thought you were gone forever," Lily cried. "Don't leave again! Don't leave!" Rose screamed, clinging to Sarah's neck so tight her knuckles were white. "I'm not going anywhere," Sarah promised, crying with them, kissing the tops of their heads. "I'm staying right here. I promise. I promise." Ethan stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame. Tears streamed down his face, unashamed. He watched the pile of humans on the floor, the center of his universe. Rose looked up from the cuddle pile. She saw her father. She hesitated, her eyes fearful. Ethan walked slowly into the room. He knelt down beside them. He didn't try to take them from Sarah. He just knelt there. "I'm sorry, Rose," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." Rose looked at Sarah. Sarah nodded gently, encouraging her. Rose reached out a small hand and touched Ethan's wet beard. "You brought her back," she whispered. "I did," Ethan said, "and I'm never letting her go again." Rose threw her other arm around Ethan's neck. Then Lily joined in, then Maya, and finally Sarah wrapped her arm around his shoulder, completing the circle. For the first time in 2 years, the Blackwood mansion was warm. Epilogue 6 months later. The summer sun bathed the garden in a warm, golden light. A table was set on the patio, the same patio that had once been the scene of a nightmare. Now it was filled with food, pancakes, fruit, and jugs of juice. Ethan sat at the table reading the newspaper, but he wasn't really reading. He was watching the lawn. Lily, Maya, and Rose were chasing a golden retriever puppy across the grass, their laughter ringing out clear and bright. They were loud, messy, and perfectly happy. Sarah walked out of the house carrying a tray of lemonade. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She was wearing a simple, elegant yellow sundress. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was the estate manager, the governess, and something more. She set the tray down. Ethan reached out and took her hand, pulling her gently toward him. She sat on the edge of his chair, her hand resting naturally on his shoulder. "They look happy," Ethan said. "They are happy," Sarah corrected him, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. "And so are you." Ethan looked up at her. The shadows that had haunted his eyes for so years were gone. "Yes, I am." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't a diamond bracelet. It was a simple silver locket. "I know it's not the sapphire," Ethan said softly. "We put that in the safe for the girls when they are older, but I wanted you to have something that was just yours." Sarah opened the box. Inside was a picture of the 3 girls, and on the other side, a picture of Ethan. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It signifies family," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "And that's what you are, Sarah, your family." She leaned down and kissed him, softly, sweetly. It wasn't the kiss of a boss and an employee. It was the kiss of 2 people who had healed each other. "Daddy, Sarah, look!" Rose shouted from the garden, holding up a flower. Ethan and Sarah broke apart, smiling. They stood up together, hands clasped tight, and walked out into the sunlight to join their daughters. The end.